All right. Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our virtual career fair for for pharmaceutical companies. We have a really great program today with a lot of great speakers. So thank you all for coming, and I'll get started and with our first speaker. Our first speaker today will be Kiki Dang. She is a director in clinical biostatistics at Moderna. And so she leads a group focusing on clinical development of public health and latent virus vaccines, as well as statistical research. And she has a lot of experience in the pharmaceutical area and clinical trials, and she publishes on a wide variety of statistical topics, such as multiplicity adjustment, Bayesian statistics, et cetera. And so we're really excited to have her today to speak with us, and I'll let her take it away. Kiki.
Thank you very much, Hannah, for the nice introduction. Let me put up the slides. Can you see it? Great. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Kiki. As Hannah mentioned, I'm a director in biostatistics at Moderna. It is my great pleasure here today to join Nari and Tom for this panel discussion. I also want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to meet with everybody virtually today. So today, I'm going to start with talking about how biostats and programming group works in Moderna. However, I think there are usually some level of similarities in terms of the organizational setup and also the job content across the industry. So hopefully by the end of the panel session, you will not only get the information from the three companies we're representing, but also get an idea in general how life or career could look like for biostatisticians in pharma or biotech. First of all, in Moderna, the biostats and programming group are set up in the following way. As you can see in the diagram in the center, this is a group of biostatisticians and statistical programmers who are the standing members of the clinical development team. So we work with clinicians and other functional experts, for example, pharmacometrician, expert on drug regulatory affairs, expert on transnational medicine, data managers. So we work with those different functional experts to design, execute, and also analyze the clinical trials. The data from clinical trial is very important. They are the basis of the registration of the new vaccines or therapies. So we work together as a team to bring efficacious and safe treatment to the patient. In Moderna, this group is organized by therapeutic areas. For example, oncology, rare disease, or infectious disease. So this is very typical that pharma companies organize their organization by therapeutic areas. And then beside this core function, we also have some other specialized group. For example, there are biomarker statistics, there are real-world evidence analytics, and there are safety statistics. I guess you can probably tell what the group are focused on based on the name of the group. So they work on biomarkers, RWE, and safety data, respectively. So for example, if you are working in biomarker statistics, you should be knowing more about the translational medicine part, the biology part, and also how biomarker works. And then if you are in the RWE analytics, usually you will be familiar with all this RWE database, which include, for example, the insurance claim database and other big data database. And you should be familiar with statistical methodologies like causal inference or data minings. And then if you're working on safety statistics, you should be familiar with something like meta-analysis, signal detections, those kind of statistical methodology approach. I'm not saying that we don't need those tools as well as a clinical development team. It's just that those groups will be more specialized and focused on certain topics. We also have other enabling functions, like here we have statistical data analytics. This group is specialized in data visualization. So they use interactive applications like Shiny app to generate insight from large volume of data. So altogether, we provide great support for the clinical development program, which is our ultimate goal of the department. Okay, then in terms of what skills will be needed in order to be a good biostatistician in pharma, first of all, I guess by definition, we're statistician or data scientist. So we should have a thorough understanding of the statistical models and the methodologies in our toolkits. I think as a statistician, we have our unique perspective to approach questions. For example, in my experience, sometimes clinicians tend to look at data from individual patient point of view for personal cares. And then as a statistician, we tend to look at the data from population point of view. So in this way, we could complement each other. And then secondly, because we're dealing with data in a daily basis, then we need to be familiar with software or programming language that we use to process the data. In pharma, we heavily use SAS for reporting. Nowadays, R is getting more and more popular. In addition, Shiny app is also getting more popular to generate the interactive platform. And then in the design stage, when we need to evaluate the operating characteristics of the design, then often we need to do simulation. For example, adaptive design or Bayesian design usually requires a large amount of computational simulations. And then besides those solid statistical programming hard skills, we also need the domain knowledge about the drug development process, how regulatories are thinking about it, what is their consideration, and also usually for a programming group, they need to be familiar with data standard that is used across the industry for submission. And then on the other side, in terms of the soft skills, I think communication is really, really important because like I mentioned earlier, we always work under a team setting. So communication is super important. You need to know how to translate the statistical concept in a language that non-statistician can understand. So this is a very challenge sometimes, but it's also very important. And finally, I think each of the compound or each of the clinical study is more or less a big or small project. So you may need to manage the project, and that requires some project management skills. For example, you could be working with a contract research organization. We call that CRO. So they're basically the vendors working with us to provide the services. So in this way, you're sort of managing the vendors to make sure they deliver the high quality results. In addition, the project always have timelines. So you need to deliver the results on time and keep track of those timelines. So these are just a few points come to my mind when I think about the skills needed in this industry. I believe the other two panels will be able to give more insight into that. Then next, I want to talk about the potential career paths in this field. So as I mentioned, you could be under the clinical development side, or you could be focusing on specialty functions. if you're supporting the clinical development program, the career path is that you usually start with leading a single study, a single clinical trial as a study statistician. As you get more experienced, then you could expand your scope of responsibilities. For example, you could be, instead of one single study, you could be leading an indication which contains multiple studies from phase 1 to phase 3 or phase 4. So when I see indications, I basically means different disease. For example, if we have an oncology or cancer treatment, it could be used in lung cancer. It could be used in head and neck cancer or brain cancer. So each of those disease is called indication and forms their own project. So instead of leading one single study, you could be leading a project or indication. And then further on the line, you could be leading a compound, which contains multiple indications. Or even more, you could be leading a therapeutic areas like oncology, which contains multiple compounds. And then finally, you could get to the point of the executive level, which you are in charge of the whole department. So basically, as you can see, there is a natural hierarchical order in terms of the expanding responsibilities from left to right. And then on the other hand, if you're in a specialty function group, then you may be focusing on a certain areas and really deep dive in that topic. For example, for biomarker statisticians, as I mentioned earlier, they need to understand more biology, translational medicine. And when I have a project which involves a lot of biomarker analysis, as a compound lead, I usually reach out to a biomarker statistician to seek for consultations. Even if both of us are biostatisticians, they can give me a lot of insight and information about a specific topic. And then you usually have the options to transfer between the two paths. For example, for myself, I started my career as a biostatistician in Boehringer Ingelheim, supporting the clinical development. I started as a trial statistician, and then after 7 years, I was leading a compound. And then at that point, I decided to switch to the methodology group in BI. It was a very nice move for myself because I got 6 years to focus on some of the methodology that I really interested, like dose finding or adaptive design or Bayesian. So that gave me a real focus on these 6 years on methodology. And then after that, now I'm switching back to the clinical development side and leading a group sort of as a therapeutic area lead. So this is what I mean. You can switch between the two paths, depends on your interest and also depends on the lead. Okay. So the next, for this one, I was asked to give a few advice to our young professionals. So when I think about it, I think that is very much in line with Moderna's value or Moderna's mindset that how we behave here in the company. So first of all, we want you to be bold, to be able to devote yourself to the most advanced and transformative technologies in the biochemistry area. And then secondly, we need you to be collaborative because as I mentioned a couple of times earlier, clinical development is really a giant ecosystem with so many moving parts. So you are working with different functional experts and you really cannot drive everything along by yourself. So that's the reason we need to work together, support each other, and also respect each other's opinion, even if they oftentimes could be different. And then the third one, which is also the one I personally think is one of the most important traits. This is the curiosity. Because to me, I think curiosity is a unstoppable inner drive to improve upon the status quo. So it is really the heart of the innovation. And in my opinion, it is also the ultimate drive of the last trait I listed here, which is relentless. So if you're working in a drug company, you know that the new drug development is full of frustrations and impediments. It's everywhere. So there could be so many failures along the way before you can get to success. Therefore, in order to bring efficacious and safe treatment to the patient, we really have to work relentless to overcome all the challenges before we reach the final goal. So that are the few advice I want to share with the audience here. And finally, to share the information we are hiring here in Moderna, and I included a link of the Workday website where you can search for the potential openings there. You can use the keywords biostatistics or statistics, and it come up with the openings that's currently available, and it's being refreshed in a daily basis. Okay, so I think that's the end of my slides and presentation. And thank you very much for your attention. I will hand it over to Hannah.
Oh, thank you so much, Kiki. That was really, really interesting presentation, and really cool to hear more about Moderna. So we'll move on to our next speaker. Noreen Kata he works as a senior director and head of clinical analytics at AbbVie. He has over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, and in his current role, he's responsible for building and executing data science and advanced analytics strategy. So he's actively engaged in evaluating the opportunities created by recent technology trends, so big data, automation, AI, digital health. And so sounds like very interesting work. And I'll turn it over to Noreen to give an overview of his company.
Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everyone. As Hannah introduced my role, I'm responsible for the advanced analytics and data science enablement at AbbVie from a clinical development continuum standpoint. Kiki laid a great foundation with respect to how statistics and biometrics as a function sits within a pharmaceutical organization, and it's very similar setup at AbbVie. And as you can imagine, the application of data and driving insights using best-in-class statistics techniques is something that we've been doing as part of the drug development process in the industry for forever, actually. And now we have more and more data sources that are becoming available. The stakeholder groups are becoming more and more data savvy. They are interested in getting their hands dirty. They want to explore. They want to be a core partner. And the organizations are transforming from a digital standpoint. So this clinical analytics team that I have at AbbVie was set up as an incubator about 4 or 5 years back. We hired data scientists, which translates to folks with robust statistics, data analytics, computer science kind of backgrounds, and have this kind of no strings kind of mindset to say, let's unleash the full potential of data. Let's work with our stakeholders. Let's be a good complement to our broader biometrics and statistics organization and bring these real-time insights to how we run business. Over the last 4 to 5 years, the team has expanded exponentially, and we currently have about 6 key areas that we support through about 50 member strong team, and we have additional staff augmentation to kind of take care of the variability in the workload. The first area that we support is with respect to the overall clinical trial design and feasibility. So we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of all the real world data that Kiki alluded to, both the claims, EHR, but also what rest of the industry is doing. and to be able to bring those insights into our trial design and probability evaluation and help design our protocols, right? You don't want to go with a criteria for enrollment only to find that that doesn't actually meet the standard of care in certain countries. So we help the broader study teams try that. The next step in the execution is to be able to select the right countries on the sites. So we leverage the appropriate analytics techniques to figure out where the competition is and help our clinical study teams to figure out the geo strategy and site selection paradigms. When it comes to execution, we work in tandem with the study teams in two fashions. One, to be able to provide like white glove ongoing operational decision support for our key programs. So we know what's happening, we are tracking and we're managing and risk mitigating. Then there's the concept of risk-based monitoring of clinical trials generally, right? It is part of ICH 6R2, and even the regulatory bodies are saying you actually don't have to do 100% monitoring for your trials. Take risk-based approach, take data-driven approaches, and make sure that your monitoring activities are correlated and kind of are supportive of the risks that you're envisioning in your trials. So with that paradigm and shift towards more of a remote centralized monitoring kind of operating model, the team enables the necessary risk management and centralized monitoring techniques for the study teams. As Kiki alluded to, there are components of safety oversight and biomarker precision medicine insights that need to be generated. This is like a continuum, right? In the traditional world, you would generate like an overall safety summary of the product and share it with the appropriate teams. And there's a desire to ask questions, interrogate, do subgroup analysis, so on and so forth. So we complement our biostatistics, safety statistics, exploratory statistics teams to be able to take their wealth of knowledge and bring it on demand. That's how I see my team kind of complementing the statistics counterparts, so that when a study team or a stakeholder has a subsequent question, they're not asking for one more analysis. We are empowering our stakeholders so that they're able to drive some of the insights and drill downs without having to go back and forth. And this has been a continuum, and we are constantly finding opportunities to really cut down the cycle time from data to insight. So that has been the mantra. We want to empower thousands of our stakeholders because the data are expanding quite exponentially. The technical acumen and the desire to leverage the data for decision making is growing across the industry and definitely at AbbVie. And we want to empower the broader stakeholder group. So it is a complement to the broader biometrics organization, but definitely a growing area. As I alluded to, we started as about 8-member team, and in 4 years, we grew to about 50+ member team. As far as the opportunities at AbbVie, not only in the traditional clinical development biometrics space, data science and statistics, as you know, is pretty much the way of running business these days. And we have our commercial organization looking for data science statistics talent. We have our manufacturing and operations organization actively looking for this talent. The industry is transforming, AbbVie is transforming, and we are actively looking for talent. So if you go to AbbVie career space and search for data science or statistics, you will find a ton of opportunities that could be appealing to your passion. And there's definitely a variety. And to Kiki's point, it's a continuum, and then to be able to be a bit more open and a bit more entrepreneurial is what I ask my team to do, because what we are trying to do is transform, and we can't only make sure that the best-in-class practices that have been proven over the years are followed, but also we are bringing the latest developments that we are seeing not only in the industry but across industries, because that's kind of where I believe we see the next evolution with respect to application of data science and analytics in pharma. So that's kind of like high-level overview of my role and where you could find additional opportunities with respect to this area at AbbVie. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Noreen. It was really interesting to hear about AbbVie and all the interesting work that you're doing. we'll move on to the panel portion of our event, but I'll start by introducing our final panelist, Tom Bradstreet. So Tom Bradstreet is the Director of Preclinical Biomarkers and Discovery Biostatistics at Bristol Myers Squibb. And he previously had a lot of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, and he emphasizes design to decision-making statistical strategies and closely collaborates with and mentors and empowers preclinical scientists, primarily biologists and imaging experts. And his current statistical interests are Bayesian statistics and statistical education. And so we'll open to our or Tom, do you want to make any comments or open? Oh, you're muted.
But the first two presenters did a really great job opening up topics for us to discuss. And I'm assuming we have a lot of students online as well as young professionals. And so there may be some questions that they all have, and my job is a little bit more of a discuss it now. And for people that have been to sessions, my job really is to try to start raising some issues for discussion and not to critique what the speaker said. And so I'm hoping that the people online have questions as well. One thing I want to point out is that we've covered a lot of areas in pharma today, with emphasis on clinical and on the real world evidence data science. I just point out, I work in an area where all the studies are run in animals, and the idea there is to build models in the animals to mimic what's going to happen in humans, and in some way use the animal models to triage compounds that might be moved forward in the clinical. And I also do a little bit of translational work too. Related to that, I heard both the speakers point out their responsibilities. I was wondering if they might share with the students some of the attributes, at least academically, that they look for in candidates. What's going to make them technically a good statistician for their area? And we talked a little bit about the soft skills. And I bring this up is because there's so many areas of statistics now. The prerequisite list of statistical training is getting longer and broader, and students have to really think, where might I be headed, and focus on the requirements for that particular area of expertise. No longer can one get a statistics degree where there's a wide range of topics covered, because just like medicine became specialized over hundreds of years, statistics is following the same way. Same thing with biology. You can get a degree in many areas of medicine, many areas of biology. Statistics is following the same pattern. So I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about a question a student might ask is, okay, what classes do I need to take? Do I need to do an internship? Who do I need to call to find out these kind of things? And since we have such a great brain trust here today, I thought we'd start talking about that to help them.
Sure. Maybe, Tom, I can start with my 2 cents. So basically, to your question about what kind of courses, for example, you want to take, I think first of all, when we are designing clinical trial, if you're working in the clinical development side and supporting clinical development, your skill set might be different from the other functions if you're doing biomarker statistics, for example. So from the clinical development side, I tend to think about there are a few, for example, 3 commonly seen data types in clinical study. This first one is the continuous data. For example, the blood pressure you're measuring, then it's a continuous endpoint. It's usually collected at different time points. then that make it a longitudinal data set. So this type of data in terms of the mixed effect model or the longitudinal data analysis will be really relevant. And then for some of the other areas like immunology, for example, or cancer, the oncology treatment, you could be talking about responder rate. Then it's a binary endpoint. So you should be familiar with lots of analysis regarding categorical data analysis. And then if you're doing, for example, cardiovascular phase 3 submission trial, or you're doing oncology, then you're looking at overall survival or progression-free survival, then those belongs to the time to events endpoint. So if you got a solid understanding or foundation in school about these 3 different types of endpoint and how to analyze them, I think that will be a very good start. However, what I want to emphasize is in over the years, I've seen a lot of candidates who comes into the pharma industry with a totally non-relevant skill set. And it doesn't prevent them to be very successful in this industry because I will link back to one of the traits I mentioned earlier, which is a curiosity. So if you naturally have curiosity, regardless of which PhD project or master project you are doing, regardless of your focus area, then you naturally will want to find out and learn about all the necessary skills to make yourself successful in this industry. So in summary, I think there are some special courses or they actually are fundamental of some of the biostatistics or statistical courses. I think those few I mentioned. So this helps you to have a jump start if you're really familiar with them and really good at them. But even if you're not, myself, actually, my PhD dissertation is on quality control in manufacturing process. But later on, I find out as someday it's actually used in the safety signal monitoring in the post-marketing setup. So you never know what you learn can be applied to. That's like, I guess it's a good thing that you have all these possibilities. Okay, I will stop here.
Yeah, thanks, Kiki. And I want to build on that, right? And I want to build on the core skills that you highlighted and the curiosity aspect, which is so important. And then from a data science standpoint, and just there's like so much kind of, I'd say there's so much potential, there's so much noise, there's so much marketing around, hey, this big data, advanced analytics, so on and so forth. And then to be able to have these hard skills, right? And then to be able to translate those into some kind of business impact and results. You hit on communication in your content. So from my standpoint, there are certain table stakes, right? You got to be able to really good at the methodology. You need to have solid understanding of using the right technique for the right approach. And then when you are dealing with large, uncertain data sources, to be able to do the data mining and model testing kind of things are kind of evolving as some of these new techniques in this space. And then with all that, when we have a lot of non-technical, non-data savvy users who ultimately have to consume these insights and make these key decisions, how are we translating this rich, robust methodology and techniques into narratives, right? So to be able to communicate and articulate the storytelling aspect of these insights is becoming key. To be able to have the appropriate context, right? I say context is king. We have folks with a variety of quantitative degrees and education, from like statistics to predictive analytics, business analytics. So there's a variety, as Tom alluded to. The science, the area is becoming so and so specialized and diverse. And ultimately it comes down to having that ability to translate the technique into an insight and to be able to be curious. And last but not least, using some of these data visualization techniques so that it can be translated, right, from a late-term standpoint. And knowing that the area is constantly transforming, to have this continuous learning mindset, I think is very important. When I did my master's in the graduation program, they said that, hey, we didn't teach you a bunch of techniques. We taught you how to learn better, right? So I think knowing that whatever we learn, the half-life of that knowledge is becoming obsolete fast and fast, or shrinking fast and fast. And then the metric that's floating out there that about 70 to 80% of the jobs in 2020, 2030 are yet to be defined, just has to be a data point that we think about with respect to this continuous learning and upskilling standpoint. So a little bit Asian flavor to Kiki's perspective, Tom.
Terrific. And I'm going to add a little bit about my area. In the labs, 90% of the time, the key questions are, how big is the absolute or relative effect sizes? How sure are we? What do we do next? Okay. And that probably applies to both your areas to some degree as well. And I was not raised as a Bayesian, but I've become one because those strategies, in my humble opinion, best address those questions. Okay. And so I would add to the list of exposures the whole area of Bayesian statistics and anything that is non-frequentist, at least to see and to get a taste of and to be aware of. Okay. I also would mention that in the two areas you folks work with, I'm believing that the statisticians, because of regulatory reasons or other, generally do the analyses and the interpretations, and there's a whole write-up that's involved. Usually the statistician has the first draft. In my area, one of the soft skills one has to have is mentoring in statistical education, because there are hundreds or thousands of basic scientists and translational scientists who are going to be doing their own analyses, and what they do for analyses ranges from quite primitive to modestly sophisticated. And so along with some of the skills we mentioned comes being able in an enthusiastically accepted fashion to raise the stochastic intelligence and statistical literacy of the teams I work with. And I know you two have to do the same thing, but you still have your hands on the data, where in my case, oftentimes I'm trying to mentor someone who is going to design and collect the data. And so somehow in graduate school or as an undergraduate, this applies in general, but particularly if you're going to go into preclinical or non-clinical statistics, you have to bring that enthusiasm for mentoring others beyond the usual teamwork, but into them being self-sufficient. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Stu Hunter from Princeton, who used to call these, what you want to do is you want to develop parastatisticians. And these are people that can design and analyze data to a certain level independently or in conjunction by themselves, and know enough to come see a statistician for everything beyond that. And so that's one other educational piece or skill set you should try to get in graduate school, perhaps through proctoring a course for non-statisticians in a consulting center or something like that. I have another question, and I see we have 2 Q&As, and Hannah, you tell me when you want to bring those Q&As in. So
yeah, well, one of the Q&As actually, we touched on it a little bit with that question about what to do in school, and Kiki especially touched on it. Was someone was asking what the significance and relevant, or how significant is the relevance of dissertation research, and was asking how common or rare is it for a recent PhD recipient to deviate from their dissertation research domains in pharma?
Well, I'll start. The best way to maximize the usefulness of your dissertation research is to get an internship in pharma for a summer or two, or possibly continued as a paid consultant. Work on a problem that someone in the stat department or any other quantitative department needs We have lists, we don't have time often. And even though companies have research, methodological development, we just can't get to them all. So if you get an internship and you can start working on that problem and turn that into a dissertation, or look for problems that match what's in industry, and you know that your dissertation does that, and then that might extend for quite a while, particularly if it's a very core topic. I'm going to speak not for Jim, but for my interpretation is that in academia, one might have a really wonderful career being an expert, and I mean expert, in all the nooks and crannies in 2 or 3 areas. You might have to teach a broad range of classes, but as far as research, I've seen people usually pick an area and stick with it. That's a little different than an industry where people have to be a little more of a jack of all trades. But if you want to maximize your graduate or undergraduate research, try to marry it up with an internship on a problem that's important for a particular company or industry. I don't know if the other two have any comments.
Yeah, I think Tom, you pointed out the ideal path for our students, and I am totally agree with you. The internship is a really a good opportunity. I'm sorry. For the students, I just want to add on that if you in the end doesn't have the luxury of doing what Tom suggested, and you had a dissertation that's not closely connected with the work we're doing in pharma, then don't worry too much. I think this door is still open, because what we are looking for in the PhD students is the ability to critical thinking. So if you can demonstrate that in your PhD project, even if it's not directly relevant for pharma, but we should be able to see your ability of critical thinking and as well as research. So some of those traits will be needed, and that will make us believe you can really catch up in your work. So just to want to add on that.
Yeah, I think it's probably the reality is what I would add to Tom and Kiki's remarks, right? I think you may start a career that is more close to the area of focus from a dissertation standpoint. But as we shared in our remarks, you got to be curious and you got to be flexible with how the overall things are evolving, right? And there are so many opportunities. So there is one way to grow is to grow vertically, and a lot of people grow a little bit in a bit of a horizontal vertical kind of fashion. So kind of covering the breadth as much as you have depth through the dissertation, I think should be a general perspective to have.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you everyone for your comments. And it's great that you mentioned internships, because the other question in our Q&A is about internships. So yeah, we have a question from a second year biostat PhD student who's been applying to a lot of places for internships and still looking. But this person was just wondering for advice, things that you look for in interns, and advice that you would have for applying for these internships, because I know they can be very competitive.
I mean, I think first, don't give up because the industry is quite huge and we are actively looking for talent, and I don't know what the specific circumstances here. I mean, internships we see as a key pipeline into our broader talent pool. We are hosting a lot of interns this summer. So, I mean, we take it very seriously, actually, and I'm sure the rest of the organizations that are represented on this call do as well. So, I think now you have 3 more connections in the industry is what I would say. And sometimes networking is one additional lever with respect to securing internships and finding the niches. So I think you're, by attending these calls, you're doing the right thing. And you said that you applied to about 10 internships, maybe even evaluating, right, a bit of a reflection on what the story is on your resume versus what's kind of called out in those internships, and maybe a little bit of repositioning yourself would be interesting. But without knowing the specifics, it's tough to get to the specifics. But all in all, I think internships are taken very serious in the industry.
I think the internships, it's like everything else, it's a matching process. There's a need that the sponsor or the company has, and there are needs of the students, and the ideal situation is to match. So sometimes it may be that someone needs a person in survival analysis. And the task at hand may be, we have a study coming, we want someone that knows a lot about survival analysis to help perform the analysis and interpretation and the write-up and the publication, or possibly to help design a trial, okay? Or there may be a research problem in survival that somebody's working on, and they want a really enthusiastic person to jointly work on that, perhaps pull in the advisor and write a paper. So part of it is matching as far as getting it. And the other thing I want to point out is, and this is, I'm going to emphasize this, it's implicit, but when you go for a job interview, different companies perform them in different ways, but they fall into the same general strategy, where you have a limited amount of time to talk with someone after you've gone through a triage process on paperwork of who the applicants could be. An internship is essentially a 4-month job interview. So if you get one while you're there, remember that you're there learning, and it's exciting to go somewhere different geographically, possibly, and to meet people and experience the local, exhibits and whatever there is to do wherever you do your internship. But it's also a job interview, and many interns will be, I'll call it, rehired by their original company that they do this with, because you have all that time to meet each other, talk, figure it out. It's a much more advantageous situation for understanding whether there's a good match or not than the usual 1 or 2 day interview, which is a whole different skill set.
Yeah, I think Tom and Nari has covered all the important topic. The only thing I want to add on is I echo what Noreen said. Don't give up. When you don't get it, it doesn't mean you're not good enough. It's just as Tom mentioned, there are some matching process, and there are also a lot of randomness in terms of whether your resume even get to the direct hiring manager. So the network could be an option. And in addition, I think the student who asked the question is in the 2nd year. Hannah, you mentioned. Okay, so I think that's also probably one of the reasons it might be harder for you, because sometimes we are the students in the higher grade, like they are in the 3rd year or 4th year, usually have some advantages, because it's considered those students are more prepared because of the a couple of more years of training, then they are more prepared for the internship, the work they are doing. So don't give up, and maybe your intern offer is waiting for you next year.
Yeah, I want to echo that. One of my favorite things used to be, before COVID, was I would go to JSMs or other places, and I would watch students give their presentations. And they might be 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever years. 1st year, they're working with a professor, and they're doing the mechanics in the professor's the lead author, but the student might be presenting, and then that flips as they go through second, third, fourth year and so forth. And I would go to the meetings and take notes on who's developing in the different academic institutions, saying, okay, well, student so-and-so has got all these things going for he or she, but they really need another year for us to consider them for a certain match for something. And whether or not there's a match, if you're a very capable, energetic, bright, enthusiastic person, and that comes through in your presentation, people are going to make mental notes that, okay, I have this list now from JSM's, in my case, it would be 1989. And I'd say, okay, so in the next year, I'm going to cycle around and recheck these students because they show a great deal of potential. And they're going to be one more year farther in our academic studies. So I want to emphasize that don't give up. If you're 2 year and it doesn't happen this year, it's probably, don't take it personally. It's just not perhaps a match yet in experience or topic. But if you do a good job and they've seen your CV, the smart employers are going to hold on to that CV and tuck it away. Used to be a paper file, now it's going to be an electronic file, and say, where is this person next year? And if they want to get you, they're going to try to look before everybody else does if they're going to compete for talent.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all. Yeah, don't give up. That's good advice. And so we're kind of continuing on. We have a couple more questions about internships. And so the next one, quick question about is an internship with a biotech company also looked on favorably or regarded as equivalent as an internship in a pharmaceutical research company? So this person defines biotech company as like healthcare device or healthcare services. So kind of a non-pharmaceutical, but closely adjacent internship.
I believe so. I think generally the diverse exposure is part of the learning and development process. And I mean, it is adjacent industry, right? So I think it is part of the continuum. It is actually part of the industry in a way. So how you look at it. So I mean, I think it's absolutely, I mean, it is building that diverse exposure. And it's kind of the nice thing, right? About you have a point of view that might be different from a traditional firm, and you'll be able to be more like vocal and leading in a way to challenge some of the status quo situations that we may be kind of dealing with in a traditional sense. So I do believe that it's going to be a nice complement than anything else.
I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think it make much difference between the biotech and pharma.
Yeah, my nickel's worth is if when the students look at a company's website or other collections of job applications, look very carefully. Many of the companies will say, well, I'm looking for a PhD in biostatistics or in statistics and certain amount of experience. And then they'll have a phrase that says, or similar related academic training and years of experience. So they're optimistically leaving the door wide open for the kind of individual they want to hire with good training. And it doesn't have to exactly fit some particular phrasing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all. And then we'll do one more question. We have one more question about internships. And I know Tommy touched on how it's a long job interview. So someone asked if you have any suggestion on how to make the most out of the internship opportunity for someone currently doing an internship. And I'll add on, when you think of like really glowing good interns, what are some qualities you've noticed?
I can go first. I think the nice thing about the industry is we are significantly connected, right, through forums like this, through other industry forums, and our networks typically go across firms, cross companies. So as Tom alluded, it's a prolonged interview, and it's also a great opportunity to find the potential lead. If for any reason the firm that you're interning at is not where you want to go back with the full time. If that's the case, just establish that credibility and leadership and make it like a seamless follow through from conversion standpoint. If for any reason you're not sure and you may want to take advantage of not only your immediate leadership structure within the firm, but with interns, we provide a lot of support structure. Don't hesitate to ask, hey, I would like to find somebody in this firm. Do you have any network connections, et cetera, and try to use that as a resource selfishly to be able to build up towards your ultimate career aspiration or your next move kind of thing. We fully acknowledge that the talent early on that they're exploring, they're trying to figure out. And as much as we'd love for the interns to come back and join the company on a full-time basis, we also understand that we need to support them from a career development standpoint. So that's one. And Hannah, to your second point, right? The quality is, it's a short amount of time, right? It's a short amount of time. And I mean, I'm actually hosting 5 interns at the moment. And one of the things that I worry about is we are so busy with everything that's going on. And we may not be providing enough support structure and follow through and hand-holding that one may need. But to be able to be open and really be selfish and drive that, hey, I'm here for 3 to 4 months, translate to 12 to 16 weeks. I want to make sure that every week is productive and own that time and hold your support structure accountable and make sure that just because somebody is busy doesn't translate to you're not maximizing the impact of your time as part of the internship. So that's how I would put it, and own the learning, translate it into a learning experience, more not only delivering on the project at hand. What are you getting out of it is equally important too.
I think not to be silly, but to capture the essence, I want an intern to come not for a job, but for an adventure. And that's the kind of person we're looking for. And I'm not talking about the company owning your soul for 80 hours a week. I'm talking myself as a scientist. I'm like a 12-year-old. Once I start talking about it, I can't shut up, okay? And I get excited. That's the kind of person we're looking for on a trial basis as an internship and for an employee. So like was just mentioned, you make the most of it while you're there, maximize your time, but you should be glowing with all the new stuff you're learning and all the contributions you're making, excited about the interaction and the opportunity. And if you're not, that might tell you it's not a good match for a return visit, okay? And assuming you're glowing, and it is an adventure, while you're there, take in the surroundings like I mentioned before. You know, where do people live? What do they do for fun? If you're into eating, which most people have to do to survive, you know, what's the palette nearby? What's your choice of recreation? If you're a hiker, a biker, or a runner, or you like to play checkers or chess, while you're there, with the not 80 hours a week, and I say that tongue in cheek, you should be experiencing all these other things. So if you do go back to interview and it's been an adventure, you have a really good idea of what's going on before you get there. And you want to hit the ground running, not just academically, but in your personal life as well.
Yeah, I really like what Tom, you just mentioned. This is a two-way process. We are saying whether you're a good fit for the company, you're also saying whether we are a good fit for you. So if the outcome of the internship, it turns out to be, I find out this is probably not what I am expected and probably not what I want, then that's still a important outcome for you. So Yeah, so I really like that point, Tom, you just raised. And back to the question about how to make the best use of the internship opportunity and get most out of it. I was thinking you can have a conversation with your manager and proactively ask for the opportunity to somehow maybe sit there and observe how they are doing their daily work. Usually we can invite interns to some of our trial meetings to let them observe what's going on and how the conversation or dynamics goes in those kind of meetings, to sort of give you a sense how it looks like. But not every manager automatically offer that opportunity. I think sometimes you can just go ahead and ask whether there are such opportunity exist. And I believe most of the manager will make effort to let that happen for you. And then in terms of what candidate is a candidate that really impress the hiring managers. And I think I can probably only speak about my personal opinion that usually I want a candidate who have the independent thinking. So I don't want the intern to just to do A and B because I ask you to do A and B. So I'm looking for an intern who can tell me why you asked me to do A and B, and how about we do C and D to give it a try. So that's the kind of students I'm looking for to rehire back to the company. And also I would appreciate the candidate who can openly communicate what he think about, even if he or she doesn't like a process here in the company. But I appreciate the openness in the communication. So that's my yeah, that's a couple of point I want to raise up.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. That's all really, really good advice about internships. And we have one question in the Q&A that will kind of shift the topic a little bit. It's about work culture. So it's specifically the question in the Q&A is asking, how does the work culture at a pharma company differ from academia? And also, I'd also would like to hear any thoughts you have too about kind of how you would describe the work culture, if you don't comment specifically on versus academia, et cetera.
I can give it a try. So I think Tom mentioned earlier that for academia, you focus on certain topic or area and really deep dive into it. And in industry, we need to know a little bit of everything. I echo that. I think that's probably one of the cultural difference here between the two. And in the academia, you can be a one-man show when you are really, really good at what you're doing. And in the industry, it's very difficult to have a one-man show. Everything is always teamwork. And as I mentioned, I think it's almost impossible for one person to know every aspect of the clinical development. So you really need to rely on the expertise from the other function to finally put a product through the whole process. So I think in terms of the culture, that's the main difference I can think about.
Yeah, I think to build on Kiki's points, it translates to business results, right? I mean, how are you contributing towards business results? How are you partnering, collaborating with the cross-functional teams? It's a team model, as Kiki highlighted. And then what are you bringing to the table, right? What are you bringing to the table? Because at the end of the day, statistician is a scientific leader at the table. And are you being that leader at the table? Because people are looking at you to guide them, to advise them, to make sure that the discipline around the best thinking is brought into the conversation. So be that leader, because people treat you as a leader. And then there's an aspect of generally be comfortable with bringing a point of view that may not be like supported by everybody, right? We don't have to go with a consensus-driven approach, and to be able to do that, I think requires a bit of a comfort with the general dynamics in the organization. But eventually, you'll get through it. But be that voice of reason if you're able to. And then from a culture standpoint, right? I think at AbbVie, culture is something that we take very seriously. It is one of the top enterprise priorities from the top, from the C-suite. And there is so much going to make sure that we are creating an environment that really unleashes the full potential of the talent that we have. So folks who want to make sure that there's a reason why you're part of the team and you're set up to be successful. But for you to take advantage of that and drive and lead, I think is equally important. We can't let other people yield, especially if you have a strong, valid point of view.
I think implicit in the comments that we just heard is there's a routine emphasis on decision making with statistical input. And statistical input is actually a large part of the decision making. Statisticians and related quantitative scientists is a very special skill set in that they can take information and make probability-based decisions. And that's where society and the companies are moving in general. You always hear database this, database that. We all know the pitfalls. Well, how good is my data? Where's it coming from? What's the biases? And I'm sure Noreen deals with this every day, given the source of some of the data sets that make its way into an RWE and so forth. But in being able to contribute to design the decision-making, you have to have the skill set necessary in terms of convincing knowledge. And one thing I want to point out that you will run into is you have to be able to, from first principles, be able to very quickly tell how your decision was arrived at in a way that's digestible by the non-statisticians. And that was mentioned earlier. But the reason I re-emphasize it is there are a lot of people who call themselves quantitative fill in the blanks that will offer opinions, but are using faulty strategies. There's a boatload of statistical folklore in the non-statistical sciences that comes to the table as part of the discussions. And a lot of it is generated in academia, where graduate advisors in the applied sciences will pass on the folklore their advisor taught them, and it doesn't stand up to first principles. I'll give you an example of something that's very popular right now in the biomarker world. There's and the journals don't understand the faultiness of a lot of the thinking, so the papers get published repetitively, and then it becomes standard because they don't know. Someone will take a sample of data and divide it into thirds arbitrarily, and then conduct a statistical test on the top versus the bottom of that sample and declare statistical significance. There's all the basic problems of it's not a design study and it's just simple. It's basically sampling theory-based significance testing. but they don't understand the basic principle of populations, drawing a random sample and making inference about the populations from the sample. They simply think taking the sample, doing a t-test in the top and bottom third, say, or whatever applies to a survival distribution, is the way they conduct business. And they're looking for biomarkers and things in this fashion. And anybody that's in the statistics program that's taken Stat 101 applications or 100 theory knows that this is an inappropriate way to function. So when we offer our opinions, you're going to have to say, well, why don't we think about it a different way and say why it works the way we do, and oftentimes why we can't, why we should go with this alternative thought, and why, and gently and delicately be able to point out why the other way is not a good strategy. And some of these decisions, and I'm going to stop talking in a minute, they're $200 million decisions. Okay. And you have to know what you're talking about, know that you can do the right thing from first principles, implement it, and you have a gentle enough style to make everybody understand in a really likable fashion without pointing out their shortcomings.
Yeah, thank you for all your thoughts. It's yeah, really a lot to think about, and sounds very very interesting and exciting. And so we're going to move to the next questions, and I'm going to go in time order on the questions. So we have one in the chat that someone would like to hear the panelists' views on how Bayesian methods are used in the pharma industry. So in general, and then also for these, the phase 3 trials.
Kiki, why don't you start with phase 3?
I was thinking, Tom, you should start as a someone who's passionate about Bayesian.
And very quickly, could we just quickly define phase 3 trials? I don't. Okay. It seems like a terminology.
Okay, I'll start only because of my conversion. A phase 3 trial, Kiki, correct me, basically is one of, there's 2 large trials at the end for particular claims. So if you want to say something in English about how a drug works, there's 2 large trials that are required. They're generally planned to be of adequate size in a frequentist sense, with the idea that each has to have a certain sensitivity or power of some type. And, they're supposed to be independent of each other. So there's a multiplication across and so forth. Now, having said that, this is a regulated environment, and the FDA is in a tough position, and moving regulatory things is often slow. If I had my way, the phase 3 trials would be done such that the 2 trials are combined in a Bayesian fashion, with a posterior probability of where we think the true relative effect size is, in addition to the current analyses, not instead of, but in addition. Having said that, the Bayesian strategy answers questions that are often begging the way we get at it in a Bayesian strategy, conditional on the information we have. How big is the absolute or relative effect size? How sure are we? And what do we do next? And I got to make a decision. And I don't want to make a yes, no decision per se in terms of the science. I want a probability of where truth lies. And then I'll make a yes, no decision if that's the world I'm forced into. Okay. And I want the probability of what something is as opposed to some statement about what something is not, which is when you think about the way frequentist statistics are used in the significance testing or move forward to hypothesis testing situation, we come up with a yes, no, declaring whether or not the null hypothesis is true. Are the active therapy and the control equal in some parameter space? And we say we've collected enough evidence to say it's not the case. Where I think, and we're evolving, most of science is conditional on what I've done. And often these decisions are made not in a regulatory environment, but in my lab or in my research, given what I know, what's the probability of truth? Where is it? And how sure am I? So I'm going to stop there. You kind of know how I got to where I'm at. I was raised as a frequentist. My professors, one came from UCLA at the master's level. My major professor at doctoral level was a mathematician. There were Bayesians in the department, but my strong exposure was not in that direction because of who I was mentored by, and also timing. We're not legally allowed to talk about age, so I'll just say I have a little more experience than some of the people today. And so until the 1990s, when the statistical computations for the Bayesian strategy was basically borrowed from some physicists, following the Bayesian strategy did not have the flexibility it does today to answer the questions the way we want. And the computing alone has made it very popular, in addition to the strategy.
Yeah, Tom, I think you have have summarized the different mindset of the two schools very nicely. I think from my side, I just want to add that for the phase 3 trial, which is usually the confirmatory trial for the registration, I think from regulatory point of view, they are very careful in terms of the type 1 error control. So because this is a risk that they could release an ineffective drug to the public, which is very problematic. So that is one of the gatekeeping roles FDA have or other regulatory agencies have. So when it comes to Bayesian, if we are talking about using Bayesian to integrate or leverage historical data or external data that is not part of the current phase 3 study, then people always have this dilemma: what if the data are not consistent in the end? So when you design a trial, you could have a prior belief that those data is going to be helpful and is homogeneous to your study data. So you decide to borrow, but what if they are very different in the end? Then the regulatory agency will be facing a very awkward situation. So that's, I think that was one of the concerns for using Bayesian. And I want to see over the years, especially the last 5 to 10 years, I was very lucky to witness a lot of advances in terms of the methodologies, how to handle this. For example, the mixture prior, where you mix informative and non-informative prior together. By doing that, for example, you can create a dynamic prior or a dynamic borrowing algorithm that when the final data looks very similar to your prior data, then you borrow more. And when they turns out to be very different, then you borrow less. So that kind of methodology, I think, truly helped with using more of Bayesian in a more confirmatory setting. So I'm not saying we are already there. We can freely using Bayesian to borrow data in our phase 3 trials. That's still not the case. But we start to see some of the applications, for example, by borrowing adult data to pediatric population, and you can use that technique sometimes, because sometimes you run into the feasibility of recruiting enough pediatric patients in your study. Then when it's appropriate, borrowing adult data to pediatric patient could be sensible. And then we also see that nowadays in rare disease development, when you again have a challenge in recruiting considerable patient to make the traditionally solid decision, when that is challenged, nowadays, I think everybody is much more open to use Bayesian to borrow maybe historical study data as a control arm in your design, even for phase 3 of rare disease development. So I think if you look at the adaptive design guidelines, actually there are a lot of Bayesian techniques mentioned in the most recent version of the adaptive design guideline from FDA. I think all the parties are really involving in this topic, including agencies as well as the sponsors. So I am very optimistic about seeing more and more application of Bayesian in the drug development process.
Yeah, I think Tom and Kiki covered the key aspects. The only thing I would add is, obviously, there are some critical areas where we want to test and prove and make sure that we are not compromising the intended outcome because of the uncertainty that was highlighted. And then there are opportunities in the oral drug development continuum where we are constantly looking for innovative approaches to decision support. So we are leveraging Bayesian concepts from a more of a core business support standpoint on an active basis and finding additional opportunities to do so. And what Tom and Kiki highlighted continue to be the case in some of the actual phase 3 designs and the core or regulatory driven activities. So.
I got a couple quick more ideas for us to just digest. I'm sure you want to move on. When I was wrestling with what I was going to be when I grew up, frequentist or Bayesian, and that was recent. There's nothing that a person does in a Bayesian world that you don't do in a frequentist world, essentially. In a frequentist world, you look at your priors and you make some judgment in your head, or you pull some numbers out of some data or something, and you use them to plan the study. And you usually plan it in a very restricted sense. The Bayesian allows you to put probabilities ideas on things. The second point is the prior for the Bayesian can essentially be equivalent to the frequentist. You can use, well, I like to call them vague priors. I don't believe in the word non-informative. You can use vague priors and Bayesian strategies with good frequentist properties. And Don Barry and those guys have made a whole lifetime out of this. Don's been a Bayesian since probably 3 days after he was born, but he's adapted to the pharma industry by developing strategies with those frequencies. The third thing I want to do as part of this is political. If students have time when they're not studying, turn on C-SPAN when the head of the FDA is testifying on the Hill before the senators. And it doesn't matter which of the two major parties is in office. But when the senators will ask a question or make a comment, you can tell within the first 3 words out of their mouths whether their political party aligns with the sitting president or not. And the FDA has to operate in that environment politically and in a regulatory sense. And for medical reasons, which Kiki pointed out and so forth, but also for political, they have to be somewhat conservative. They're really between a rock and a hard place. They have a no-win situation. They should be given medals.
Yeah, thank you all for very interesting thoughts. It's interesting to hear. I think, if we think of maybe pharma sometimes as like a conservative industry, but it is interesting to hear how it can be very dynamic too in these new kinds of designs. And so we are coming up close to time. We have a couple more questions, but I'll answer as many as we can, but we'll try to wrap up at the 1:30. And so one question we have really quick is for people who want to transfer from academia to pharmaceutical companies, and how to prepare for that, and some expectations from the companies or hiring managers. Or to
do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, so somebody asked, for people who want to transfer from academia to pharmaceutical companies, how should they prepare, and what will be the expectations from the companies or hiring managers?
I think ultimately the key point that the hiring managers look for is what is the candidate bringing to the table, right? A lot of skills are transferable between academia and the industry, a lot of them, right? And then there are specific aspects with respect to the leadership, the translation, willingness to acknowledge that, hey, this is a new space, but this is all the research I've already done, right? This is, I know your company is working on these things. These are the latest developments you had. This is your so anything that you could start to speak the language, but also make it clear that you're bringing something to the table because you are, and ultimately how this is a good match, to use Tom's terminology, I think is what we're looking for. And I don't think it's hard.
And I think we would be looking for a range of people. For example, whatever one was doing in industry, in academia, if they were researching a particular area and generating papers on a research track with, 1 or 2 course teaching load, that person might fit in a certain area in industry different than a person who was working in an academic consulting center, perhaps having the luxury of designing trials, but usually people show up with the data and you throw it on your desk in academia, say, what's this say? I got to graduate this year, that kind of stuff. And I appreciate all that. And then you might have someone that has a really strong teaching role. And there's room for that in industry as well, too, because there's a lot of need for physician educator and that kind of thing. So to expand on what Noreen just said, all of it is really wonderful. It's looking for the particular match, and we actually have uses for those 3 major categories and several others. And also, I'm going to say tongue in cheek, be expected to be paid more, right? I think that's probably, except for very, very experienced, talented people in academia that have strong consulting gigs, I think the income's probably going to go up and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I want to add, nowadays, I think there are also a position in many companies called a methodology biostatistician. So that could be a nice middle point between academia and industry. So those, I mentioned earlier, myself actually working in methodology biostatistician position for 6 years. And I have colleagues who come from academia, and I think they really find a nice environment for themselves as a methodology biostatistician. And I see the trend now, more and more companies are setting up similar groups within their organization, although it's usually not a large group, but it's a group that can be considered for this.
One difference I'm going to point out in 10 seconds is, as far as publications, the companies will have this seemingly obtuse clearance process, which one is usually not used to in academia, where you say, I feel like this is my opinion, I write it up, I send it out, and then I'm on my own, I defend my work. Where in the company, there's legal ramifications and all that, so it's a little harder time-wise to get things published. And if it has anything to do with key company secrets, you may have to wait.
Thank you so much. And yeah, all very interesting to hear about. And so we are at 1:30. So thank you everybody for your participation. Thank you so much to our panelists. This is a lot of really interesting, really great advice, and really just a good insight into the industry. So encourage everybody to keep an eye out for upcoming NIST events in the future. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending.